Hello, everyone. Wishing you a very happy new year and welcome to today's session exploring IoT and OT hacking, which is also our first session of this year. And I am Ritika Chakraborty. I will be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules for our attendees. The session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 10 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to the organizers or our speaker, use the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio video challenges, please check your internet connection or you may log in and log out again. And very important announcement, we have started CPE credit certificates for our attendees. The criteria to get the CPE credit certificates, the attendee needs to attend the full webinar and then write an email to cybertalks@ecouncil.org. Also, we would like to announce to our audience about the special handouts. Take the screenshot of the running webinar and post in your social medias like LinkedIn or Twitter, tagging EC Council and use the hashtag CyberTalks. We will share free handouts to our first 10 audience. Discovering the enhanced CEH Volume 12 with its innovative learning framework, Learn, Certify, Engage, and Complete to advance your cybersecurity experience.
Is CEH worth it? This is a question that has been asked by countless aspiring cybersecurity professionals, and we bring to you information that is backed by real data collected from thousands of cybersecurity professionals that have successfully pursued the CEH. Their incredible career stories and honest reviews of the Certified Ethical Hacker program is published in the 2023 CEH Hall of Fame report. The key findings of the report are: 1 in every 2 professionals received promotions after completing the CEH program. 95% of professionals chose CEH for career growth. 97% of professionals say that CEH labs accurately mimic real-world cyber threats. 97% of professionals say the skills they learned in the program were crucial to protecting their companies. 93% of professionals state that CEH skills improved their organizational security. 92% of professionals reported that the program helped them feel more secure in their skills. 92% of hiring managers prefer candidates with the CEH for jobs that require ethical hacking skills. 88% of professionals consider CEH to be the most comprehensive ethical hacking program in the industry. 80% of professionals started their cybersecurity careers with the CEH. So, if you're ready to jumpstart your cybersecurity career with CEH, the world's #1 ethical hacking certification. These cybersecurity professionals have undertaken a similar career development journey with CEH and are now working in the industry, including many that have successfully gained employment in top government agencies or even in Fortune 500 companies. Start your journey to success with the CEH today. Visit www.ecouncil.org/CEH. Become a certified ethical hacker now.
To know more about this certification, visit our website or write to connect@ecouncil.org, which is given in the chat section. Now, about our speaker. Lisa Bock is an experienced author with a demonstrated history of working in the e-learning industry. She is security ambassador with a broad range of IT skills and knowledge, including Cisco security, CyberOps, Wireshark, biometrics, ethical hacking, the IoT, and generative AI. Lisa is an author for LinkedIn Learning and an award winning speaker who has presented at several national conferences. She holds an MS in Computer Information Systems. So, right now, without any further delay, I would hand over the session to you, Lisa.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I want to first begin by just thanking everyone from AC Council for inviting me to talk with you. This is a really great field to be in, and as far as immersing myself, those of you that are on LinkedIn, you follow, I would encourage you to interact because there's a lot of great people that provide information to help improve your skills on a daily basis. So what I'm just going to do is just kind of talk about this next slide here where we see the modules. Now, if you haven't already taken the CEH or you're working towards those, these are the modules that are involved, and there are 20 of those. And the question is, do you need to be proficient in those? And the answer is yes. You need to have a very good understanding of each of those modules. Now, if you're not going to aspire to go to the CEH at this point, you're not quite ready, that's fine too, but I would encourage you to take a look at all the objectives within the CEH. That will help to provide a solid base of knowledge for you in your career. Now, when you're looking at the CEH and when we're looking at ethical hacking, pen testing, however you want to phrase it, how does this fit in with what we do on a daily basis to secure our systems? We have to think about it in a number of different ways. One is that when we think about security, that's proactive, and those are active methods we use to try to prevent bad things from happening. Forensics intrusion detection is reactive. Things have happened, and now we have to figure out what it is and then prevent it from happening again. There is another field called CyberOps that's actively monitoring the system. And then we look at ethical hacking. So we think we're secure, let's make sure. So when we look at those modules and all in general, when we look at as far as all the different types of components with that, you see that the one is IoT and OT hacking. That's what we'll talk about today. Now, for many of us that have been in the IT field for many, many years, this is a new-ish concept. And how new is it? Well, it's about, well, let's see, we'll start back in 1999 when Kevin Ashton, who had begun working with RFID tags, saw these tags as a method to be able to communicate and be able to track them and be able to see what was happening wherever they were in the world. And he coined the phrase Internet of Things. That didn't really take off till about 2010 when manufacturers started to realize that we could embed these small chips in all types of things. And that's where we began to see the expansion of the Internet of Things. Now, fast forward to today, where we have literally billions of IoT devices throughout the world in all different types of industries. Now, the question is, some of you might say, and I've talked to people and they'll say, well, I don't use any of that, because they're thinking one thing, they're thinking the Ring doorbell or something that's, going to be a camera or something that's going to be in their home. But the fact is, if you go to a hospital, if you go to an airport, if you eat produce, somehow you're using an IoT device within that whole chain of events because they're everywhere. Now there's over 8 billion people in the world today, and industry experts feel that there's approximately 7 IoT devices for every human being on Earth. Now that's a significant number. Now in itself, you're questioning, well, what could it possibly do? Well, the IoT devices are always listening, always sensing, and are designed to help make our lives a little bit better. Let's take a look at the next slide, which I want to talk about why do we need to test the IoT and OT. I'm going to read a story, and this is actually something I want you to think about when I read this. In a bustling metropolitan area known as Greenhold, This has a state-of-the-art water treatment facility, which have always ensured clean and safe drinking water. However, Greenhold falls victim to a malicious actor who has successfully infiltrated the city's water treatment system and launches a devastating cyber attack on the water treatment facilities. They then exploit this vulnerabilities in the facility's industrial control system, gaining unauthorized access to critical systems and altering the water supply. This intrusion goes undetected for some time, and the actor covers their tracks and manipulates data to avoid suspicion. As a result of the tainted water supply, residents begin experiencing a sudden surge in waterborne illnesses and strange symptoms, such as nausea, vomiting, and gastrointestinal diseases. Hospitals and medical facilities are quickly overwhelmed with patients seeking treatment. The question I have is, could this happen? Well, the answer is yes, it can. And the industrial control systems have been affected by this. When we think about the IoT and the original security methods that were put onto these devices, there really wasn't any. The thought was that these devices weren't really a tasty target for malicious actors, but we find that we were wrong. And we need to secure these devices, and we need to address the fact that they are vulnerable. And what you see in that little image right there is, that's sort of a little bit of code. Part of what we're going to talk about is OT and the ability to manipulate the code in order to achieve something malicious, to damage a system and so forth. But let's just talk about some of the things when you're looking at the CEH and what are the components and what are the elements and the objectives of that module. One of them is just to simply understand the IoT. And that's, one thing, it just gives you an overview of what the IoT is and some of the elements and what it can do for us. Then we're going to talk about some of the security issues that are involved in IoT devices. And then it moves to showing how we would actually try to hack the IoT when we talk about ethical hacking and the ability to manipulate the integrity of a device. Then we'll move to controlling with OT and exploiting OT systems. And then all in all, this is our goal, is that we need to defend against attacks. And that's part of the CEH, and what's nice about the CEH is it circles back to that fact as to what you need to do to mitigate, to potentially protect against any future events. And again, with the attack surfaces as we see it today, that's expanding as, in a daily basis, it becomes a little bit more complex. So when we're looking at this image here, what makes up the IoT? In this, you see everyday objects, and those include other things, the thermostats, fitness trackers, home automation, sprinkler systems, anything that helps us to make our lives a little bit better. The Ring doorbell, which is now, it seems everyone's going to have that. But it makes up that ecosystem in that they're always listening, they're always sensing, they're listening to you, they're talking to each other and to us. I did find something kind of interesting in a real estate contract where it talks about the fact that the presence of smart and green home devices are capable, that are connected to the internet directly or indirectly, and the data stored on those various devices make up the digital ecosystem in the property. And what it says is that you need to make sure that you remove any data within that system before you leave, and people have left without it. So your system, the privacy issues that go along with the IoT are also an influence, and you need to be mindful of that they are always collecting some type of data. So privacy issues are there. It's a separate topic, but it is something to be aware of. So when we're looking at the ability to constantly gather data, that's what it's doing. Now, we're talking about millions and literally billions of low-powered sensors that they go about, they monitor processes, they gather data. Now, when they're gathering the data, what are they doing with it? Well, in some cases, they are just simply responding or waiting at some point for, or if we have to turn on the light, it does that. It maybe only has one task. But it also communicates to other devices and also data repositories. So when we're looking at the IoT, we have to think about how this helps our world. When we look at smart cities, now smart cities are designed to monitor traffic, the lighting, to be able to make sure that emergency vehicles can get through quickly. It has to have split-second timing in order to make those decisions. So we have data that is making decisions at that level, but it's also going to go to the cloud. And then in some cases, what they call the fog layer, that's a layer in between, in order to make a decision, to create some action. So those devices, when we think about them in our world, they're designed to improve efficiency and save time, money, and resources. Now, when we're looking at those devices that are used in our homes, but we also have them in other industries as well. Manufacturing is a big use of IoT devices. Healthcare is another one. So they're used in many different areas, and we're also finding that they're expanding and finding some uses for them in many different areas. But unlike the devices that we're used to using today, like our computers and our systems, they have different protocols that are used to move the data in the IoT. We have Bluetooth, Zigbee, 6LoWPAN. Those are different. So when you're going through and understanding the IoT, there's also a different mindset that you need to do and understand when we're looking at doing an ethical hacking exercise. There's a little bit of a learning curve in some cases that you have to look at these devices a little bit differently than you do our standard devices in our workforce today. So when the next concept is to recognize the fact that there are security issues. And when we get into this, I feel awareness is a big component of providing protection, is to be aware of the fact that these devices can be vulnerable. Why are they vulnerable? Well, they're small. A lot of times they don't have a lot of processing, not a lot of memory, and battery life is very minimal. So they're subject to attacks. And when you think of the different types of attacks, the range it seems as if people actually think about what they can do in order to attack these devices. For example, if you have a monitoring system that it's monitoring critical something that's monitoring critical systems, that it needs to be monitoring that the devices have the right levels at any given time. So these devices are constantly monitoring the levels or the temperature. One type of an attack that is able to be launched is called a denial of sleep attack. And this attack hits those devices so many times that it drains the battery, and then it's unable to respond correctly because it doesn't have any power left in order to monitor. So the number and range of attacks seems to be endless, and it seems to be evolving. Now, one go-to place in order for you to learn about some of the vulnerabilities is the OWASP. OWASP is a website that is dedicated to continuous research on different vulnerabilities. And they publish what's called the IoT Top 10, and they have the top 10 vulnerabilities when we're dealing with web interfaces as well. Now, the last one I think was 2018, and so you're thinking, wait, that seems like a long time ago. But the fact is, and I've been following OWASP Top 10 for many, many years, the fact is, they're always the same top 10. They move up and down in priority, but they still remain as top 10 vulnerabilities. And when you're looking at, the top ones, and that's called the low-hanging fruit. And if I want to attack a system, those are the things that I'm going to look for: weak, guessable, or hard-coded passwords in secure network services. But there's others, as you can see. But those are the ones that I'm going to try to go for, because when you think about leaving a password on a system and not changing the default, it does happen. I'm going to try to find those devices, and those are the ones that I'm going to attack because I know the password. Now, if you were to do an investigation on an IoT device, and some of you all, have, because you want to see what happens when it communicates. So you would take some device in order to monitor the protocol exchange. And if it's in plain text, you can see the exchange. There's some devices They use passwords, but they're predictable, meaning you might get 3 devices and the first password is 1, 2, 3, 4. The next one is 2, 3, 4, 5, and etc. So they're predictable. And in some cases, they're sent in plain text. Some cases, they're not able to be changed. So these are vulnerabilities that provide the ability to launch an attack. So when we're looking at different types of attacks, there's a number of threats and vulnerabilities. And when we're looking at why does this occur? Well, systems and IoT devices generally mass-produced and are similar in design. They're inexpensive to make. Now, you're looking at a brand name which is recognized, they might not have the vulnerabilities, but if you look on the internet and you're looking at some of the sites that offer a smartwatch for $3, I mean, people don't think about buying like cameras that are $2. They're cheap and easy to implement. Those are the devices that probably don't have as many security options as you would like, but people, they still use them and they're still, implementing those. So they're mass produced, similar in design, but the other thing is sometimes the manufacturer, when you look at the components in a single IoT device, there may be several manufacturers involved. So one might be very secure, but the other one isn't. And in fact, they don't really update these or change these very often. The updates are a lot of times the device is sold once and done, and they're not updated. So that's a concern, only because you might, have something that is outdated and is vulnerable, and everyone knows about it. As I said, it has low power, minimal memory, and also there are privacy issues. So when we're looking at collecting and transmitting sensitive data, we're always aware of the fact that things are out there that can expose our information, but this is yet another thing that we need to be aware of. The cameras or microphones can invade the individual's privacy by unauthorized recording because, again, their job is to listen, sense, and record, and sometimes respond. So it's part of their job, but they don't always know when not to. So when we're looking at some of the different types of attacks, there are a number of those. Some are more severe than others. Now, one is the botnet recruitment. And when we have malicious actors are sometimes proud of their work and they share their information. Now you can find, for example, default password for a device, and somebody published it on their main company webpage, and they knew that that was a big mistake because they published a list of default passwords for all their line of devices. And that may have been 3 or 4 years ago, and they then have since taken it off. But if you do look hard enough, there's sometimes a blog or even the Wayback Machine that has still published that information. And that goes to your reconnaissance exercise. It's one of the first things you do. You might stumble upon it. It might not be an easy find. You might have to dig through a lot to find it. But if I'm determined and I want to attack someone or something, I'm going to look. And so when I'm looking at the vulnerabilities, and maybe it is, a password that's out there or some other vulnerability, I can use that to poison the IoT device and provide it to be a part of botnet recruitment. And that is then used for large-scale denial of service attacks. And they are done. Man-in-the-middle attacks, that works by intercepting communications because I can take over and sit in the middle, gather the data as it's transferred over to another device, and no one would be any wiser. And the other concern, and this is one that I feel this is a serious one, and this is where we see the supply chain attacks, is I'm able to poison one device and to get into an attack of one device, but then I can move through, maybe spreading malware throughout the entire supply chain. Long-term implications of that can be critical. And when I say critical, and you're thinking, okay, maybe my device won't work, and yes, it may be part of distributed denial of service attack. When we're looking at the potential that these attacks could lead to loss of life, and I don't say that to be dramatic, but it is true. We can damage equipment, or we can just simply cause aggravation. There's a range of things that can happen if there's a potential attack. So when we look historically over what has happened and how things are, attacked, maybe you've heard of Destroyer 2. That was a Russian attack on the Ukraine infrastructure, the electrical system. And there's various variants that are used in order to attack these industrial control systems. And this is, again, a concern. And I don't know if we have, if you're following anybody online and you're interested more in this topic, there is, Mike Holcomb has a lot of great videos out on YouTube and is helping to provide awareness. And I credit him because I think we need to spread awareness of these vulnerabilities, these vulnerable systems, in order for us to protect them. So the first thing is awareness. And again, he's doing a great job of spreading the word. So industrial control systems, Mike Holcomb. All right, and so when we're looking at the Destroyer 2 and various variants that go with that Destroyer 2, it's a targeted attack, meaning against the electrical systems. It's modular design, and this is when I look and do a forensic exercise on a different type of an attack, you look at it and you go, respect, because it's so well written, this modular design, which I can modify it to do what I want it to do, and that makes it a better method of attacking. It's capable of causing serious damage, and this is where we're looking at destroying industrial control systems. Then the question is, how does this happen? Well, it can happen because when you're looking at the code for these systems, there's a logic ladder, it's a small program, it's a script in order for it to perform its function. For example, in some systems, in order for it so it doesn't run continuously, it will go through a phase, meaning it will go run, 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 then rest, run, 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 rest. And if a malicious actor were able to go in and modify the code, it could modify it to run, 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 and burn the device out. And we're talking like a centrifuge, for example, in Stuxnet. So these things are serious issues that could escalate. Again, the range of attacks can go from mild and being part of a distributed denial of service attack to destroying equipment and also loss of life. So, these are things when we're looking at how and why we want to get into protecting our systems. This is when we're looking at hacking the IoT and what do we go through in order to make this happen. Well, in the certified ethical hacking realm, in any hacking exercise, there's a series of steps. One is reconnaissance. Now, this step alone, so if anyone is out there and you aren't maybe quite sure, you're not really technical, you're not honed on your skills, you don't know how to use Kali Linux, there's a lot of things. If you at least can help with your team in doing a thorough reconnaissance exercise, this is a valuable exercise. The reconnaissance itself is you looking through on the internet as far as what's available out there in order for you to launch an attack. And I will tell you, there's plenty. In fact, sometimes I have to stop and I go, wow, I can't believe I found that, because it's so out there. Again, you may have to dig, and if you know and you like digging, this would be a great job for you. As part of being involved in a team approach, being able to unearth that information to start the process is a valuable skill. And again, what I tell you is that, you have a device, and whatever the device is secure, and I've updated everything if I can, patch and mitigate any vulnerabilities, but not everyone has the latest device. In fact, in working with clients, sadly enough, this is what I find is kind of shocking, is they have outdated equipment, seriously outdated. That is going to be your soft spot. And when I say a lot of people, I mean there's a lot of people, and they say it still works, why should I change? Well, outdated equipment is, again, the low-hanging fruit. Okay, so the next one is when we go through and we scan the systems and we identify what's out there. You'd be surprised, using maybe curl statements or whatever, you can find a whole lot of devices, but there's also other things that we can do in order to scan systems. There's other methods and also vulnerability scanners that are used. that in order for us to just assess what's out there, what kind of system that it's running, how is it communicating, lots of things that it can help build a map or profile of where those devices are. Internally, there's a lot of tools that we can use in order to achieve this exercise. Now, once I've just determined those devices and I know they're out there, the next logical step is to try to gain access to modify the integrity of the device. Now, again, I'm talking about an IoT, but when we talk about OT, we have to be very careful in doing any kind of ethical hacking, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But just let's go with this, and being able to gain access and maintain access so that I can modify the integrity and possibly put in a backdoor to the system. But the fact is, sometimes these devices already have a backdoor built in. They immediately phone home as soon as you plug them in. And that's where you need to see what's happening when your device is plugged in and who is it communicating with. At the end, we cover tracks and remove any evidence and put everything back to the same position. But during this exercise, what I always tell people is when you go through and you're working with your team, you discover some gaping vulnerability, you want to stop and let everyone know, because this is something that needs to be mitigated usually right away. Just say, wait, hold on, this could compromise the integrity of the system. We can expose data, we can do a lot more damage. So you'll be surprised at what you find when you do this exercise. Sometimes nothing, but a lot of times there's more. So how are we going to gather the intel? Now, you need to learn about what's happening on the network, and this is where you have multiple tools and techniques that are available out there. Multi-ping, that just goes through the device and again on the network, and it just says, hey, are you out there? And then it will respond, yeah, I'm out there. Now, when we're talking about pinging IoT devices, you've got to be careful. Now, if you're using something like Nmap and other devices, multi-ping other devices, keep in mind that there are a range of settings that you can use so that you don't want to bombard that device. So if you hit that device too many times, it's not good for that device, because of the reason it can't respond that well, and it could drain the battery. So when you're going to do with slow scans, minimal scans, you have to kind of modify those settings so that you're not overwhelming the IoT device. Again, there's also, when you're gathering information, you can do something like FCC ID search. What's cool about that FCC ID search, that website, and you put the identifier in there, it goes to a page where you can, the vendors will show the pictures and the internals of the device, so you can get a better idea of what it is you're looking at. Remember the fact that those devices are small, and in some cases they're in plain sight, and you can take a look at what could be modified within it. So again, you're looking as the ethical hacker from the outside in, and what is it that you could potentially use to leverage the ability to launch an attack. And it all goes to a couple of things: threat versus opportunity. A threat that could possibly happen, is the opportunity there? Does it exist? If it does, there could potentially be something that is going to happen. So when we look at the vulnerabilities itself, when we look at what is a vulnerability, we look at OWASP and all those things that go with that. Vulnerability is a flaw in the system that a malicious actor can exploit in order to gain unauthorized to an asset. So vulnerability is something that is part of this whole matrix of when we want to drive down risk, and why we're doing the ethical hacking in the first place is to drive down the risk of an attack. So when we talk about the three things that are involved in risk is a function of threat times vulnerability. Now, what does that mean? Well, threats exist, and there really isn't anything I can do about it. For example, there's a threat of a snowstorm today, and there is snow coming down, kind of pretty, but that's a threat. There isn't anything we can do, but I'm vulnerable because I have to drive somewhere and I need snow tires. So maybe I have snow tires, so I'm less vulnerable. So when we're looking at that, how can I reduce the risk of sliding off the road? I need to have snow tires. Well, the key here is vulnerabilities, many cases, can be fixed or reduced. And that's where we need to identify the vulnerabilities, because the threats we can't do anything about. They simply exist. But if there's a vulnerable component or software flaw, we many times can mitigate that. So we're looking at those different ways in order for us to check those vulnerabilities. We have Nessus, OpenBOSS, Nmap. There are IoT protocol analyzers. Also from the vendor. The vendors are providing some helpful tools that are out there to help you to assess your own system. You want to scan for open ports, and then also make sure that only the necessary ports are open, and also that they're properly secured. And again, we're looking at some of the online ability for us to search through and see if those ports are open. Again, you're going to be surprised because they're out there, and you can run a scan on your system, and you'll be surprised, and you're wondering, why is that open? It may have been open because the manufacturer left it open, and so we want to make sure it's secured. Now, tying into this, so you know, it's not always the device that's connected to the internet. Not every IoT device needs an IP address, and that's because what happens is sometimes there's a cluster, there's a network of IoT devices talking with each other. Then they go to what's called a gateway, and the gateway then communicates with the outside world, and maybe the gateway is vulnerable. So that's tying into the system itself. All right, so we're looking at the vulnerabilities, but the next thing is potentially attacking IoT devices. So once you identify the vulnerabilities, the next thing is to attempt to attack the device. There's a lot of different attacks. Now, you may not run through an actual attack. For example, there are side channel attacks, which monitors electromagnetic emissions or other characteristics. Blue horn attack actually works to remotely take control of a device using the Bluetooth connection. Replay attack, recording and then replaying a captured signal to a system to mimic a legitimate command. That would be like a rolling code attack that is used on a key fob on a car. What I'm saying is you don't always have to act on this. One thing that you could do is just test a device outside of the realm of the network and do what's called a tabletop exercise and run a small test yourself to see if it's vulnerable, because you will have to be careful in an ecosystem that you could damage it by launching an attack. So seeing if it's actually possible and then mitigating it, that's another whole consideration. So you may not be attacking it, you just know that you possibly could. But you also want to gain access in that case. We go to try, malicious actor wants to alter the integrity of the device. So how and where does this happen? Well, the team is going to need a method to interact with that device, and one is called NAND glitching. This is a hardware attack that manipulates the NAND flash memory and disrupts the normal function. A software-defined radio, and that's the ability to provide a customized radio communication. And software-defined radio-based attacks, they go to intercept, modify, or jam wireless signals, and then take unauthorized control of IoT systems. Now, you're asking maybe, how do I do this? Well, there's plenty of tools online, and they're not that expensive. You can get a decent SDR-based attack tool for maybe $100. Some of them a little more expensive. You can get IoT, devices to do replay attacks, not that expensive. So there are plenty of tools available, and they're readily and easily available. I would encourage you to try them. You'll be surprised how easy it is they are to work. There's also Telnet. And Telnet, provides us access to a system, and it's used in a good way, but a malicious actor can use it in a not so good way in order to launch an attack. For example, the Mirai botnet scans the internet looking for open Telnet servers, either on port 23 or port 2323. If you go to Shodan and you just simply do a search on Telnet, you'll find thousands of devices out there outward facing port 23 or 2323. Whether or not they're secure, that's the next step. Of course, you're really just looking, but they are out there and they are exposed. So when the next part of this component, this module, the CEH, is controlling systems with operational technology. So operational technology is the whole realm of ability to control systems, critical systems that are used in industry and processes to manage water treatment plants, electrical grid, that if they were to be attacked, it could cause devastating results with a large scale of individuals that are going to be affected by that. So operational technology and industrial control systems are used to drive efficiency and connectivity in industrial sectors. This is, again, a topic that maybe wasn't so much in the forefront, but with recent attacks that are used, and when you're looking during any kind of war, it's always a lot cheaper to launch a cyber attack than to blow up a city, because I don't have to use any explosives, and I can take down a city by taking down their system, their water treatment plant, their electrical system. Some critical infrastructure could be damaged. So you think about the ability to provide a lucrative, attack. That's usually what we're looking at. So looking at different elements that are critical infrastructure and control processes. But again, when we're looking at this, there's also key technologies and protocols that you'll want to be aware of. That again is somewhat of a learning curve that you have to understand how these different Modbus, Profit Bus, HART, and OLE for process control. So these, okay. So when we're looking at the big picture as to what the occupation or operational technology is, well, operational technology encompasses all the sensors, the protocols, and software that helps to control devices, processes, and infrastructure in industrial environments. So looking at, again, the big picture, there are several subsets of operational technology. One is industrial control systems, and that's one subset of that. And within that, there's also SCADA. SCADA is also very integral, and within you're also going to see sensors, human-machine interface, PLCs, and distributed control systems. So the subsets within that are what we're looking at as far as the complexity of it. And this, the system, and when you're doing some ethical hacking, and this is where you really need to approach this in an entirely different way, because of the fact that if you were to disrupt the system in any manner, it could cause devastating results. So even doing this exercise, you have to be very careful and working with a monitor, somebody that will be able to guide you through this. And again, the type of evaluation that you're going to do is a little bit off of the normal ethical hacking exercise that you might do in a regular IT environment. It's entirely different. So when I want just looking at this complex image is what you kind of looking at is all the operational technology, industrial control systems, and all that's involved within that is that you see the different clients that are out there, and then the different, what you see also then the protocols that are working within this Modbus TCP. Then within that you see PL, programmable logic controls. And then down here on the physical layer, those are the small devices that are used to communicate within the systems. Right there, though, that human-machine interface, that's sometimes the target because not all, but the operating system that uses HMI is either Linux or Windows. And if it's Windows, sometimes that's a great way in order for me to breach the system. So I will say that when you look at Stuxnet and Destroyer, that's what we're going to use in order to attack that system. And it has proven to be effective. So that's what we want to kind of take a look at. That's one way we can take a look and hopefully mitigate that vulnerability if there are any. So what the challenges of operational technology is that reducing the risk can be challenging. It can gain access to a system in one of several ways, as we see the complexity of those systems itself. And you have maybe a malicious insider or someone that has gained your trust, or someone who's posing as someone to gain access into the system and to be able to communicate and modify the integrity of the system. But that testing itself and pen testing or ethical hacking in operational technology requires a unique skill set. And this is going to be something you'd have to get into with someone and take a little bit more of a deep understanding of those industrial processes and protocols. And again, with trepidation that you go in and enter into this ethical hacking exercise because of the fact that it could possibly cause serious damages. So unlike with the IT networking, again, this is entirely different. The scope of testing and the rules of engagement are usually more complex, and you want them to be. You want to say exactly what it is and where the narrowing of what it is we can do while we're going through this exercise. So when in general, the ethical hacking in IoT and OT is crucial for identifying vulnerabilities, protecting infrastructure, and ensuring the security and integrity of interconnected systems. So in general, that's kind of what I hope encapsulated the idea. This module, I really enjoy working with this module. I really enjoy teaching it. But as you can see, it's a little bit different mindset than IT. But I hope that you immerse yourself in it and gain a better understanding to see, because I think it's not going to go away, and I think there's going to be more security risks as we move on, and there's more IoT and OT devices that are being exposed. So at this point, I guess we'll answer some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your wonderful presentation, actually. So the audience loved it. They have so many questions already
Good.
before the Q&A. Thank you so much.
All right.
So before we get started with our Q&A, a small announcement for our audience is that today's webinar is in sync with our CEH certification. Easy Council CEH maps to many ethical hacking roles in the industry like security analyst, information security analyst, certified ethical hacker, security consultant, site administrator, and network management executive. Anyone with CEH certification is eligible for 18,000 plus numbers of immediate job openings in globally, with an average salary of 90,000 to 110,000 USD per annum. If you are interested to know more, kindly take part in the poll which is going to conduct right now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we will reach out to you. So Lisa, shall we start the Q&A?
Yes.
The question is how IoT hacking works.
Oh, okay. Well, as I said, that has to be part of the original terms of engagement. The fact is, an organization will most likely identify that they have IoT devices. For example, the warehouse has IoT cameras or sensors to monitor the levels in their manufacturing component. So you begin with your rules of engagement in order to determine what is it we're testing, where are they, and what exactly is it we can access. And that's the first step. And then you go through these stages of ethical hacking, as we have learned. We go through the reconnaissance and vulnerability scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and then covering track. So it's similar, but again, the rules of engagement will be a little bit different than in a normal or regular IT environment. And that's where, as an expert in your team, will have to guide those individuals, because this is a new realm for them, and they may ask you for some help. So you might want to guide them on the best way to approach the ethical hacking exercise.
Thanks, Lisa. Our second question is why the minimum memory for a device is considered as a vulnerability?
No. Well, because there isn't a lot of memory involved in it, and we want to, the fact is that the devices itself are not robust. So we can exploit it. In some cases, the memory involves a very simple thing that it's supposed to do. So if this happened, then do this. Because it's so small, and it could be just a switch that we say, if the temperature goes above 100, shut off the device, and we can maybe change it to 1,000. So you know the memory doesn't hold a lot of information, So it's a little easier that we can modify it because it's not like we're searching through tons of memory like we have on our systems.
Thank you. Our next question is, since IoT devices are very vulnerable and we love to have them at our houses, how can we protect ourselves?
Oh, that's a good question. All right, so when we're looking at, IoT devices in our homes, and that's something a lot of people don't ask because they just go and they get them. And as we've learned, and you can see these sites coming up and advertising for really inexpensive IoT devices. And those are the ones that probably are not as secure. They're made with multiple vendors, manufactured on the fly, and they're cheap and easy to implement, but they might have a backdoor inserted in them. They might be able to communicate with the phone home immediately. So if possible, do your research first and before you go in and buy the device, and see what it is and what others are saying about it. Is it a valid company? And if there is any possibility to, do they have firmware updates? And again, depending on the devices themselves, like for example, smart lighting, they do have updates that can be applied to your device. If there's credentials, you want to make sure that you can change them, that if they're built in their default, you want to change them so that they're your own, and don't leave them as default. And there's plenty of sites out there that I can find to get the default passwords, and you'd be surprised how many people leave the default passwords. We're using strong passwords, but again, you can't possibly, there's not like a huge amount of characters that we can use, and there are some limitations sometimes in order for you to put the passwords in, but you want to make it your own. And then if there's any security features in your network that you want to apply, disable any unnecessary services. But if we're talking about this being in your own home, think about it. If you have a small company and you're using the IoT devices, you want to provide that security of those devices as well. Another concept, and that is again talked about in the ethical hacking module, is the concept of zero trust. And that's a concept that we used to think that the internal network was safe because it was inside, but zero trust means that we never trust, always verify, and making sure that any device, any perimeter, any device that's talking to one another has to provide some method of authentication. So if we take it into our home, do your research, make sure that you have credentials that we can update and change and make your own. If you're working in a small company or even a large company, you want to apply zero trust so that no one can interact with those devices unless they're authorized.
Thank you. Our next question is, what about securing the systems? What are the ways to secure the IoT devices?
I think that we just answered that question. Again, you want to provide some type of a shield so that we don't have direct access and no one is able to directly modify the integrity of that system in some way using logical controls, meaning password protected, or it could be behind a firewall, something. And again, using the concept of zero trust.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next question is, most industrial sectors are not connected to the internet. How can it still be hacked?
Well, like I said, the human-machine interface, and that was going back a couple of slides, there's got to be a way that somebody can manipulate the system and to modify the logic of the system. And the HMI, or human-machine interface, is somehow the target, because that's kind of the gateway in order for me to manipulate the way that the devices work. So that's here, and then inside the soft, chewy inside of the industrial control system. That's where your devices are sensing, they're monitoring, they're doing what they need to do. So if the human machine interface has maybe an outdated version of Windows software, that's going to be the target, because I can get in, manipulate, move into the system, and I can set up shop in that system. If I'm able to get into the system, I can lay in wait. And that's called an advanced persistent threat. And that means I'm going to be there not weeks, months, but possibly years, and then launch an attack at another time. So that's like your question is, how can I have direct access? I don't always, but there's a method in order to interface with the devices, and that, in the industrial control systems, that would be your human machine interface. And again, if it's an IoT device in your home, sometimes it's just a matter of being able to touch it. And then if you have access to it and you can touch it, sometimes you'll be able to manipulate the way that the device performs. There's such a broad range of the devices. There's so many things, as I told you, the FCC ID. In doing that search, if you were to see that the vendor will post pictures of the internals, also how to access it and how it works. So there's research out there that you can do before you even go in to touch a device.
Thank you, Lisa. We will be taking our last two questions. And to the audience, that we are really sorry that we cannot take all of your questions. We will be requesting you to please write to us to our email ID with your questions that you want to ask to Lisa, or you can connect to Lisa on her LinkedIn ID. We will definitely connect you through Lisa via our email so that she can answer all those questions. So our second last question is, where is OT applicable to the cyber world? I didn't see their application yet.
Say that again.
The question is, where is OT applicable to the cyber world? I didn't see their application yet.
Operational technology. That's within the industrial control system. So I'm going to ask you, those of you that are curious about this topic, go to the CEH and look at the list of objectives, and that is where it'll step through what are the components of operational technology, the industrial control systems, the soft spots, the areas that we need to be concerned with, some of the attacks that were launched on those systems. So again, I don't want to say this is a newer concern. It's one that's being brought in the forefront a little bit more. And you may not have heard about this before because it wasn't maybe popular at that, before, but now it's becoming something that nation states are using it to take down cities, take down, critical infrastructure. So your operational technology, this is something that you need to be aware of. And again, you might not be involved in this as far as an ethical hacking exercise. The awareness is the first thing. And again, once you get into this, the way you test it is entirely different than an IT system. But awareness is really important, that we need to start spreading the word and also sharing that knowledge so that people are aware, so that they begin to take a closer look at what they have, maybe managing their water system, managing their infrastructure. This has been something we've talked about for years. In fact, in early days of InfraGard, we talked about securing our infrastructure because we know that's the target. So it's been out there. It's now a little bit more closer to reality. And again, we want to take a look at the objectives of the CEH, and that'll step you exactly through what it requires you to do in order to be a little more proficient in that area.
Thank you, Lisa. We will be taking our last question. I work in the healthcare sector, which is high risk of IoT hacking. What legislative considerations are there for IoT hacking?
Well, that's a good question, and only because what frustrates me is that I see that there are vulnerable targets in the health sector. It's one of the top ones, and that is when we're looking at being able to take control of the system and self-drug distribution, monitoring. Okay, we think about refrigeration. Like you think, oh, I'm going to attack the refrigerator. Could that possibly be? Well, yes. If I attack all the refrigeration, you could have medicine that is spoiled in addition to your food. So, yes, that is a consideration, is one of the top ones that may take control of your system, and I don't want anything but money. That's where you have ransomware, which is a pretty, it's not going to go away anytime soon. Ransomware is a serious threat. What also comes with ransomware is once I take over the system in some manner, I might not make any action. I might threaten to, but I can. In addition, I'm in your system, and if I've been in there for any time, I can move throughout the system and gather some information as far as a database of possibly of your patients, and then I have medical information, and then I can move to extort you. So yes, the medical field is a top level threat, a vector where we want to make sure that we do secure those and share the information, making sure that they are vigilant. And there are methods in order for the system itself is designed to provide security and privacy within the healthcare system. It's a challenge, it really is, but we need to be vigilant. That's the whole thing, is that we don't want to let our guard down.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for answering all those questions and giving this great presentation. We have actually received so many requests for the next session. Before we conclude the session, I would like to announce our next Cyber Talk session, which is Confessions of a CIA Operative Unveiling the Secrets of Human Hacking, is scheduled for 17th of Jan, which is tomorrow, by Peter Wamka. And this session is an expert presentation. To register for this session, please visit our website, which is www.eccu.edu/cyber-talks. The link is given in the chat section, and hope to see you all on tomorrow. Thank you, and you all may disconnect your line.